the attention of all your eyeballs, so human eyeballs and visibility. But at the same time, they also need to be able to register with the platforms and have algorithmic visibility. You need to be able to posture yourself in a certain way so that you're ranked high on social media, such that people can discover your material when they're scrolling through their feeds. So here when we're looking at high visibility, focused on the culture of the high visibility, it may not always be a positive spin or a positive brand. You can see here, for instance, I put several pairs of talents or several pairs of conditions. You can be famous on the internet for a good reason or a bad reason. You can have talent or skill or not. It can be sustained and long-term or transient and viral. It can be intentional, it can be monetized or not. All of this is measured by a few things. Number one, what platform are you on? If you're on a very traditional platform like YouTube or Instagram, you tend to go viral or rank high for positive content that people enjoy. But these days, in the age of call-out culture and cancel culture, on platforms like Tumblr or Twitter, you tend to also register interest for very negative reasons, whether it's controversy, scandal, or shame. And here's where you see a lot of companies borrowing on this negative attention sphere in order to trigger the algorithm to also promote their content. Now I'm going to give you very quickly a few examples of internet celebrities who may not come across to us as influencers. Zach King was once very popular on Vine, although the platform is no longer with us. He has transited into mainstream media, starring in advertisements. With Troye Sivan, my favorite from Perth, Australia, where I live, who started out on YouTube but is now a mainstream media star, being in Hollywood as an actor, but also starring his own albums, singing songs. We have Yutakis from Singapore, who started on Instagram, and most of his really quality content is transient. They're mostly on stories or Snapchat, and they're not meant to be archived. And this fosters this sense of FOMO, or the fear of missing out. It's a way of introducing an element of risk or an element of exclusivity so that people will continue to subscribe to your content actively, checking your feed consistently, as opposed to just passively subscribing and waiting for updates. Brother Orange is my favorite from China. The short version of the story is that he bought a phone that was originally stolen and sold on the black market in the US. When the original owner, the American man who's a journalist, opened his phone one day, he started seeing all these images of a strange Chinese man that he thought his phone was haunted or hacked. Turned out they still shared an iOS cloud between the original phone and the new updated phone. The story blew up on the Chinese interwebs, and from this one-off virality, this story has been made into a movie and also a book deal. Grumpy Cat. These days, a lot of internet celebrities are not even human. Consider also, of course, virtual influencers. Scale. Many a times now when we talk about the most effective internet celebrities, we're not really going for scale in terms of quantitative numbers. Instead, what we're looking for is resonance. It doesn't matter how many people you have, it matters how many people you can persuade to make a decision, to believe in your cause, to click on a button, to buy a thing. So for this reason, we see a lot of companies now going for celebrities that have smaller audiences, that really can capture the heart of what they're up to, and to persuade them. This is a very brief history of internet celebrity. I'm not going to be running through it. It is in my training as a professor and academic to go theoretically tracing the histories of these events. But the one thing I do want to highlight is that internet celebrities usually always start off as ordinary, everyday people. Unlike the draw factor of traditional celebrities who are glamorous, have high status, the idea of an everyday, ordinary internet celebrity is that they are just like you and me. So if a pimple cream works on me, as an ordinary person, you would feel more persuaded that it can also work on you. But if a really prominent actor like Angelina Jolie comes out and promotes products, people tend to approach this with a hint of skepticism if it's an everyday consumer product, because they don't view her as the girl next door. It's perceived as if she's got other social qualities, cultural capital, that make her consequences more difficult to achieve. There are four main qualities across most internet celebrities. This is true of almost all country markets and almost all platforms. I am here now focused on the human eye aspect of the visibility as opposed to the machine algorithmic aspect. The first is exclusivity. This often appears on platforms such as Instagram, where we are very attracted by these figures because they have something very elite or very rare in possession or in their talent and skill. We also have the idea of everydayness. This is when your internet celebrities produce content with utmost consistency. It doesn't really matter the quality of the content or the actual content itself. What really matters is that over time, they build a really good social relationship with you, such that if they were to drop off the internet, not post for 1 week, which is a very long time in internet time, you feel a sense of loss. So they're cultivating this traditional parasocial relationship with you. We have now across different cultural markets, most of all being used the quality of exceptionalism. This usually happens when there is a cultural practice or a norm that is very normal in one country or one platform. You take it, you transplant it into a completely different space, and all of a sudden that new audience there finds this so interesting and so exciting. This case in point, which I encourage everyone to look up, is Miss Ye from Sichuan in China. Now, we all know that YouTube is not very easily accessible in the Chinese market. It is also a space where a lot of Chinese creators come up with very creative ways to capture your attention. Miss Ye, for example, uses everyday office appliances to make a meal. In several of her videos, you would see her using a very, very old computer PC that has been overheated in the office to cook fish, or to use soap and use that to make fire so that she can toast marshmallows, etc. The idea of her exoticness or her exceptionalism is that she, with a small team, transplants this content that is very normal and very acceptable in China to YouTube for an international audience, and they brand themselves with a touch of Chinese creativity to speak to an international sphere, which may not be familiar with them. Another famous example now you see are a lot of foreigners who go to learn Mandarin and then build up a profile on places like Weibo or WeChat in order to come off as exclusive or interesting on that side. If we go even further longer, in cultural economies like Japan, there is even a word, gaijin celebrities, specifically to refer to foreigners who look very, very un-Japanese. So if you're a white man, you better be very, very white. If you're an Asian person, be extremely Asian, but not in the East Asian Japanese way. These people are noted for their different qualities, and they're sold as tropes in these spaces. The last of these is exoticism. This is when we have internet celebrities come up here specifically just to shock you out of your wits with their content. They may do very interesting things like mukbang eating. This is Kinoshita Yuka from Japan, whose secret talent is eating a copious amount of food in one sitting. So for instance, 48 pieces of KFC chicken or 100 cheeseburgers to capture your attention, but also to market a food brand or things that she subtly puts in her background. But we also have this South Korean celebrity Shori, whose famous trope on the internet is that she usually dances with music in the first few seconds, and then when the beat drops, she takes out a food item related to the lyrics of the song or the space that she surrounded herself with, and then starts dancing and rubbing the food on her body. It's the kind of practice that doesn't really make sense on the very weird parts of the internet, but the intrigue and the curiosity captures your attention and you stay there watching without even knowing what the agenda is. The most successful of these internet celebrities eventually become influencers. Remember how earlier on I gave you all those different pairs of what makes a good internet celebrity? Influencers generally live on the better spectrum of that. So for instance, they caught positive celebrity, they are long-term, they make money off their business, and they cultivate a persona that is easy to discover. Most of them tend to utilize this device known as an advertorial. Now, there's been a lot of debate these days about how influencers are not objective, they're not here to give us the economy standard, they tend to represent their self-interest. And my response to all of this is, yes, this is what exactly they were intended made to do. Internet celebrities who become influencers are so celebrated because the personal opinions they cultivate are useful to people who want to know exactly what they think. Young people who are looking at influencers are not here for objectivity. They're here to find out what they feel, how their lifestyles filter specific ideologies, and how they can be role models for us. Another thing that I'm not going to go through, but academic research has shown us, is that the top influencers tend to have these 5 elements in their practice. This is accessibility, believability, authenticity, emulatability, and intimacy. Now, looking also at the scale of internet celebrity, I want to now turn from the human eye of what interests our culture to the machine eye on what triggers the algorithm. Here we have to look for two types of scale. This is scaled for a country population like Denmark and Sweden, and scaled for a platform like YouTube. We generally have 5 different categories of internet celebrities and influencers. It is measured by how strong their subscriber or their follower count is, but it can also be measured by their function, as we see on the extreme right. Super mega and macro influencers these days are not very different from broadcast media because they don't have a niche and they're so relatable to a very wide audience. We see them just functioning as nodes or broadcasters. What really happens is that they have the ability to capture attention in a very saturated internet space. So they act as sort of like a radio receiver, where a client deposits a message into them and they broadcast this in a very efficient way, cutting through all the noise and saturation on the internet. Your regular mid-tier influencers still serve as your opinion leaders for strong communities, which Joe will talk about in a bit, and your micro and nano influencers are focused on everyday micro interactions. These are the folks whom you see reply almost every single comment, replying to almost every single Instagram story. They're here to cultivate very short-term but multiple bonds among small groups of people in order to foster and grow secondary communities of influencers. If you're interested, I'm happy to also chat about my research looking at influencer agencies. To give you a brief idea on how many types there are, we have some, like Cure right at the top here, who are focused on cultivating influencer personas. We have some, like Cube, that are interested in cultivating people who are media ready, whether for the internet, for TV, for radio. Some of these agencies are focused more on specific demographics. Loppy, considering the tradition of mummy blogging in Sweden, focuses primarily on parenting influencers, so they've got a strong niche. United Screens focuses on the platform of YouTube, so they're very, very smart with knowing how that platform ecology works, etc. If you'd like to chat more about these agencies and their functions, I'm very happy to go through them during our chat. I want to end off with this before a closing slide. Legacy media is leveraging on influencers in so many ways. We've been talking a lot about how these influencers are no longer just social media specific. Literally, if you own a media company in print, television, cinema, you need to get your hand in on this. Very often they're used as crowd puller cameos. You would see these ginormous, beautiful posters for movies. They'll put a YouTube's face, they put an Instagrammer's face front and center. But you go into the theater and find out they're only there starring in a 2-minute cameo of a 2-hour movie. And yet, forefronting them in the publicity of this movie invites so many people who usually live on this space on the internet back to cinema, back to radio, back to theater. We also see television networks getting in very early on child influencers, which is quite a big controversy in North America recently, where we see YouTube and sooner or later the likes of Instagram being asked to interrogate how they deal with advertising to children. Specifically here, the model goes like this. Parents these days like to share content about their children. Not all of this, of course, is done intentionally to sell. Sometimes this is done because you just want to share when your kid does something funny or says something funny. Now, sometimes a group of these videos then goes viral. When this happens, news networks like The Ellen Show invite these children to repeat and perform that act again on their show. And this is where we see the crossover from social media virality into TV mainstream media popularity. If this takes off well, we often see then these TV networks signing deals with these children to groom them into proper internet television celebrities. But there's also a lot of resistance. Danelle Bregoli, who is better known as the girl who coined the phrase "catch me outside, how about that" on the Dr. Phil show, was approached by many TV stations after she went viral on the Dr. Phil talk show. But instead of giving them interviews, she very quickly signed up with an influencer agency and told them, "Talk to my manager." All of this happened 2 to 3 years ago, and for those of us who do not remember this history, today she is a supremely influential, powerful, and viable internet celebrity who's got her own makeup line, her own music videos, and also her own emoji and other merchandise. Here are 3 established theories in the influencer industry. Number 1, The idea that a lot of times we tend to think about internet celebrities and influencers as very vain, very frivolous, just young people doing fun things online. For a very long time, the most successful of these internet celebrities were very irritated that adults were not taking them seriously. But today we see that they're embracing this because they really enjoy the fact that because people underestimate them, they're allowed to thrive longer in the industry and continue to have strong income and earning power under the radar. We also have the idea of visibility labor that I referred to earlier on, where you have to now engage not just the human eyeball and interest, but also the algorithmic eye to understand specific platforms and what their norms are. And finally, astroturfing as a nice lead-in to what Joe might be talking about in communities. These days, we also have networks of influencers who have such strong fan bases that their fans voluntarily do a lot of these advertising for them. You see this happening most often in the comments section, where fans are persuading other friends to take up a product, where they're tagging all other people to come and see something. A lot of this starts out as a labor of love, as a genuine fan, but over time, many of these super fans become cultivated into second-tier internet celebrities or influencers. I'm going to end with this and hand the time over to Joe. Thank you.